let's not pretend this isn't exactly what it looks like. It's the ending to a quadrilogy. Marvel vs. DC, not Marvel vs. DC, Marvel vs. anything but DC, and now DC vs. anything but Marvel. Let's get going. This is my attempt to make a hypothetical season of 16 DC vs. non-Marvel matchups that I don't outright dislike or find too boring to exist. This was actually even harder than the Marvel vs. non-DC one, which to some might come as a shock, and to the rest of the Vs community would result in a sort of, yeah, that's about right nodding. Let's begin. The premiere I had to talk myself into liking, but it is in the end my favourite matchup in general for the two, even if my stance in it being a death battle is kind of muddled. He-Man vs. Shazam. Now, in terms of what the matchup's actual qualities are, obviously thematically they're two normal, unassuming individuals who summon lightning that changes them into muscular beefcake superheroes with a really jovial vibe, drawing power from divine power sources originating within locations that few can ever travel to. Also in a crossover, He-Man became Shazam once. So thematically it checks out, but in terms of animation, I feel like it could also be fun. While yes, He-Man does use a sword and Shazam doesn't, I don't think it'd be too hard to work in a way that He-Man spends a lot of time fist fighting, or having Shazam come up with ways to deal with a sword. I'm certain Shazam has fought sword wielders in the past, and probably even has managed to draw swords himself out of magic cheese or something. The vibe these two have sounds like it'd be really fun. They're both fun characters in general, who are capable of being serious while also having a light-hearted tone. Definitely would be capable of some high-scale stuff too. He-Man characters shove planets around and Shazam has punched black holes into existence. I think that could lead to some really fun over-the-top stuff that plays into the goofiness. However, obviously the question is, does it need to happen? And I don't know, probably not. Here's the thing. I think, should they do this, it should take itself more seriously than He-Man vs. Lion-O. That episode excelled at being a fun 80s cartoon-style fight, while He-Man vs. Shazam would preferably be more comic book and other Master of the Universe materials He-Man. Going into more of He-Man's actual story and vibe across his series instead of just his original incarnation. And in that regard, I think Shazam has a similar serious but in a fun way vibe that plays into He-Man way better than He-Man's other options. Consequently, I also think that sort of He-Man plays for Shazam better than other characters like Sayo or Thor do. It doesn't need to happen, but I'll probably not complain if it does, as long as it plays into those more serious elements and gives us a battle that is extremely hype instead of extremely camp to distinguish itself. And on Shazam's end, I just really want a good Shazam shout, man. So I like Transformers a lot, but I was kind of adamantly against this matchup for a while, but I sort of come around to it. It's Shockwave versus Brainiac. Thematically, I mean, my knowledge goes as far as these two are cold, calculated beings of logic whose machinations form the grand schemes of many stories, and everything ever is their fault, especially for Shockwave. But I just think it'd be cool to see them fighting. Brainiac has a ton of weird powers and technology, I'm sure, and I think that would match IDW Shockwave's usage of ores. And I think the idea of them getting interested in each other's technology as the battle goes on sounds cool. I also really like Shockwave. He's one of my favorite Transformers characters, which I feel like I say that a lot whenever Transformers is brought up. Starscream, Megatron, Optimus, Ironhide, Metroplex, Omega Supreme, Shockwave, Soundwave. I could go on with more characters I love. I guess Trypticon's one of the ones I didn't say that for. But I mean, I even love Skids. Shockwave sounds like he'd make for a fun analysis, and when it comes to opponents for him, they really aren't many to go with. I think the same can be said of Brainiac. I don't think we need Brainiac vs. Ultron after Sigma happened. Brainiac vs. Freezer I kinda like, but I also think I don't think it'd be the most interesting episode. And the only other Brainiac matchup I like is Trazyn the Infant from Warhammer, and most of you don't even know who that is. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name right. Trazyn. So yeah, I take this. My only shame is that Shockwave dies, and I hope they don't use True Form Brainiac. I will say that I did bounce around on this and Trazyn a lot, because Trazyn brings a lot of his own interesting things. Necron abilities border on reality warping, so I think he'd actually play off True Form Brainiac better than any other character would if they decided to include it. I mean, the guy even fought several Catan shards at once. And he's a collector of things across the galaxy, so there's plenty of interesting interactions and random shit they could utilize in the battle against one another. You could even have something accidental happen, like, oh, Butterfingers, the fucking Tyranid Hive Fleet that Trazyn somehow captured just exploded out of nowhere. Oh no, this Hive Fleet is heading towards Brainiac's ship, and it's going to devour the cities he captured, causing them all to explode and detonate out of Brainiac's ship from within, causing him and Trazyn to be forced to watch as their collections are destroyed, now deciding as they stare down at one another that they will simply restart their collections, starting with each other. So there is a lot I would like to see there, but I think for a death battle, the lack of visual media for Trazyn, or at least anything beyond like just text, makes me want to stick with Shockwave. That and character preference. So, okay, for episode 3, this one is really stupid, but it sounds really funny to me. And that's Cyborg vs. Kamen Rider Stronger. Now, I know Cyborg has a lot of matchups, like Andro 17 and Genos and Frankie and whatnot, but personally, I just think Stronger's funnier. Hey, I watched like 2 episodes of Stronger. I do know more about him than most people in this community. These two are ex-football star superhero cyborgs who use technology derived from their enemies. Yeah, it's a strangely specific similarity, I kinda love it. How many ex-football superhero cyborgs are there? Obviously there's not much of a debate here, but I think this is a matchup where you should just focus on direct feats. Forget herald scaling, sounds better with just feats. And obviously for animation, I don't know, it just sounds fun to me to have Cyborg with all these crazy weapons that Stronger just dodges and jumps around while landing his electric punches and kicks. I think Stronger should use his big finisher, only for Cyborg to just get back up, which makes Stronger realize he needs to use his charge up form, which he does, and he starts putting up a really good fight and even overwhelming Cyborg at points. Cyborg should try to hack Stronger's Cyborg bits, and probably even succeed at that. I think Stronger's sort of cocky attitude and snarky comments in battle work well with Cyborg's personality and would make for a fun fight. I greatly prefer Stronger coming in over 17, who did basically nothing and then came back and continued to do nothing until the very end of the tournament where he won by doing nothing. And Genos and Frankie I just don't feel like I want to see them against Cyborg, so Stronger comes out ahead. I like Stronger a lot. So for episode 4, this is weird, because I genuinely cannot choose between two matchups here, so I've just got John Constantine written down. I had two matchups for Constantine that I really like. Constantine vs. Rider and Constantine vs. the Doctor. So you'll just be seeing their thumbnails sort of switch midway as I talk about this. So John Constantine is definitely one of those DC characters I'd really like to see in Death Battle. In terms of like the Vertigo characters that are actually in mainline DC's multiverse, he's probably the big one that I want to see. He has two matchups that I wrestle with in my head, and I like both of them. So I can't say much for the theme of Constantine vs. Rider beyond I believe they're detectives of the paranormal. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing Rider's name right. I don't care. And they summon demons, and they also beat up demons, something like that. And from reading the G1 blog that I'll hopefully remember to link in the description, I do think it's a cool match. I think their arsenals and their summoning work well with one another, and I think that in terms of matching John Constantine the Summoner, it's extremely good and also highly debatable, which is great, especially with a character I like as much as John. I would not necessarily know who wins from the offset, though I'm fairly certain they give it to Rider. I mean, if John can't summon anything crazy like God Swamp Thing, just like regular ass Swamp Thing, and thank fuck, because I think if he summoned God Swamp Thing, the debate would just not exist anymore. On the other hand, the Doctor I feel matches Constantine better in terms of an individual fight. While he's not a detective and he doesn't deal with demons much, the Doctor is still someone who investigates unusual events and deals with plenty of shit. And he matches Constantine in that they're both British, which is either a big plus or a big minus depending on if you're correct or not. But I also think the Doctor brings plenty of his own shit that would make for an interesting one-on-one battle. Especially if there comes a moment where Constantine retreats into the House of Mystery and the Doctor goes into the TARDIS, only for them to return at the exact same time they left, now having given themselves all the time they need to collect their best gear. I think that'd be a cool scene. As far as I can see it, the biggest thing that would sway my mind is that Rider vs. John feels it would require a lot of summoning, and thus I don't think Death Battle's budget would be able to do it to the best of its ability, while the Doctor vs. John wouldn't lose out on its potential as much. It's just a one-on-one fight without needing other characters. So with the budgetary concern in mind, Doctor vs. John is not likely to leave me thinking, wait, that's it? While Rider vs. John almost certainly would, unless it's a finale. And I don't know if Rider would draw in enough views to be finale material. So if it was a finale, sure, go with Rider vs. John, but I think for like a regular episode, there's just no way that Death Battle's budget's gonna be high enough for me to be happy with what they produce. I'll just be thinking, that's it? And I guess personally, I just have way more connection to the Doctor than I do Rider. That being said, I wouldn't complain either way. I also think Rider works extremely well, and it would be great as an episode, so, well, I mean, it could be. I think it's most likely going to be disappointing as an episode, but, because budget issues. I mean, hey, if everyone's going to use budget to excuse the criticism I come up with, then I'm going to say that budget's going to be a big problem with me enjoying a lot of episodes. And this is a big one because they summon a lot. So while I do have a preference on my own, I'm not that picky. I'd take either. My only question for John versus the Doctor would be which Doctor they'd use. I say that as if it's not just going to be David Tennant. I mean, at least one of them, should they choose to have the Doctor regenerate. Which, you know, you could probably have a scene where John and the Doctor kill each other at the same time, but then they just bring themselves back to life and continue the fight. That sounds fun. So yeah, this episode, just choose which one you prefer. I know most people will be choosing Rider, and for the two of you who choose Rider versus John and have actually played Shin Megami Tensei and know the first thing about him, awesome! And for the people who don't know dog shit about Rider, like me, pizza dog. For episode 5, I like G.I. Joe, and I like Snake Eyes a lot, and I'll take basically any matchup for him that's good. So when someone throws Cassandra Cain versus Snake Eyes at me, what can I say for sure? Apparently the theme is that they're basically mutant ninjas taken from their parents at a young age, raised by ninja clans, who would find themselves taken in by heroic families later, where they'd have various moral crises of conscience. Oh, my lungs just played up in the middle of that sentence. I'm keeping that in because I'm lazy. And like Snake Eyes, Cobra Commander, and Storm Shadow are the G.I. Joe characters I want to see in Death Battle the most. So with Cobra vs. Hydra and Storm Shadow vs. Strider here and existing, I'm glad to have a Snake Eyes matchup I can be happy with. Cassandra, from what I'm told by one or two people, is really cool. The rest of them, though, just say, wow, she could solo the Bat family, and stuff like that, which, you know, when that's all the people throw around to me, without actually explaining how she can do that, it makes her look like she's some sort of self-insert on Mary Sue. Now, I'm sure she's not, but, you know, maybe next time people talk to me about her, they should actually tell me why she's a cool character, why she's well written, why she can do all that, instead of just, wow, she's such a good ninja that could beat like 20 Batmans on her own. Because when you just drop that, and, like, as far as I know, Cassandra's just a regular person. I don't know if she has any powers or anything. Apparently she does have a shitload of weapons though, which is great, because hey, that would work well against Snake Eyes, who also has a lot of weapons. I guess one concern would be if Cass can really stand up to Snake Eyes going around taking down Transformers, which is canon if you're wondering. But even then, hey, I mean, based on what people tell me, Cass is just one of those, wow, look at how good she is characters, so I don't mind her being beaten down with someone as good as Snake Eyes. That is a very unsubtle call once more for fans of Cassandra to talk about what makes her cool. Episode 6, I did not realize until now that I've included 2 Shazam matchups on my list. This is DCEU Shazam vs. Movie Sonic. I know Detective Pikachu exists, but here's the thing. Movie Sonic kind of outclasses him in every way. Like, Detective Pikachu barely knows how to use his abilities and just doesn't sound too interesting on a one-on-one fight. MCU Spider-Man and DCEU Shazam are my go-to matchups for Movie Sonic, and between them, Spider-Man isn't from DC, so I can't choose that. Anyway, yeah, the match is kind of as it seems. They just have very similar characters and also kids with lightning powers thrust into the role of superhero. I would hope if Sonic gets Super Sonic in Sonic 2, that it helps make this fight even better too by giving us an aerial potential fight. After all, there's a lot I think that could be really charming with this fight. I like to see Sonic being really fast, but not so fast that Shazam is completely incapable of keeping up. Just fast enough that it's not really that big a struggle to dodge Shazam's attacks, but he still has to go out of his way to dodge them. But I'd have Shazam still coming up with ways to deal with them anyway. You know, like, I don't know, tricking Sonic into stopping so they can see who's better at flossing and then punting the fucker across the sky before he can start. I don't know. I can even see a bit of the start where to show that Shazam isn't entirely outclassed at speed, they fucking recreate the Superman seeing Flash scene from Justice League, but this time it's Shazam and Sonic. That just sounds so funny to me. And like in that scene, Sonic is still faster and able to avoid Shazam anyway. Just something to show that Shazam is slower, but he's not being totally shit-blitzed here. And yeah, I think this could be a really charming, cool fight. Do I like it more than Sonic vs. MCU Spider-Man? I don't know. I think both of them have a lot going for them that could be really cool. It's a bit of a toss-up for me. Either way, I'd take either one, honestly, as an episode. But for this video, I have to go with Shazam, because he actually fits the criteria. Episode 7 is definitely a matchup that I have no connection to. It's Bane versus Jack from, I think, Baki Grappler. They're doped up on drugs for the sake of beating up one super skilled guy they don't like, something like that. I don't know much about Jack or if I've even got the right character or name here, but Bane coming back for an actual episode that's, like, good would be fine by me. I have nothing to say about it. Coming in for our mid-season finale, this might be my favorite matchup on the list. Might be. I mean, there are a few others I quite like, but this one is just so good. It's Q versus Mr. Mixer-Spitterlick. That's my one attempt at saying his full name. I'm just going to call him Mixie from now on. And that is right, Star Trek Q, the one from Next Generation, the guy who's in a tier with Data at the very top of my Star Trek character tier list, and Mixie, who's one of my favorite DC characters. No, the theme is not just the fact that Q has a simple one-letter name, while Mixie has word salad. Obviously, thematically, it amounts to characters who come to the third dimension from a higher one to fuck with lesser beings. Their powers are mainly insane reality warping derived from the fact that they have a higher dimensional existence, and despite not necessarily being the most powerful characters in all their stories, they are some of the strongest and carry a lot of weight when they appear in the room. I know that I have to really be clear, because there are probably some people who are curious who could be more powerful than Q in Star Trek. It's less like there are characters who are more powerful and more that ones that are like higher dimensional, so they're likely, potentially, at a similar power to Q. The Traveler's potentially there. John Doe, when he gets like his full power, could be there, but it's vague. The Provost of Bajor and Pa race that they fight could be that powerful. I think like the Prophets are confirmed to be like around the level of the Q. I think, the God of Rubicon 3 is also higher dimensional. But like, the strongest being in Star Trek that I know of is partially Q. It's Q Prophet. But anyway, the big appeal to Q versus Mixie to me is how well they bounce off one another. These characters have three sort of facets to them that match each other extremely well, because they all the same between them. The first is the lol random goofy guy. See Mixie turning Lobo's space cycle into a flamingo, or Q coming onto the Enterprise as an entire ass mariachi band. Obviously this works well together, both doing really random nonsense things. The second is the snide sarcastic bastard who constantly reminds you how you're just objectively less than them. There's too many examples of this just naturally being in their dialogue to point to, but obviously this would work together in conjunction with the lol random stuff to produce some really fun banter between the characters. That would be a good chunk of the battle, and I don't even know how to approach discussing their potential because it's Mixie and Q, that just whatever you think they could do in a fight, they can do it, so it can be such a fun and wacky battle. However, it's that third facet that makes me really interested. These two, when they want, can also be highly philosophical characters, serious, thoughtful, full of opinions. Think Mixie's real question and Q in the final episode Next Generation. In my mind, the final portion would involve the two debating philosophical musings on the nature of reality, the value of life, and the meaning of existence to one another, all while putting each other into various allegories, paradoxes, and philosophical thought experiments. Imagine Q putting Mixie into Plato's allegory of the cave as one of the chained up men. He's discussing philosophy, but then Mixie counters by turning Q into the line in the analog of the divided line. But then, Q puts Mixie into Zeno's paradox of the Achilles race, so on. Naturally, it would be Q saying, how much can you really trust reality if you're only seeing a shadow, and then Mixie's responding with the divided line, like, if I divide you and one part represents the real and one part represents the unreal, are both any less real just because they can never interact with one another and can never see each other? Does that really make sense? And then Q was Mixie in the paradox, like, you say that, but like, does it really matter asking that question? In the end, just like in this race, you'll never actually reach the end of a question. What's the point of asking a question that there's no answer to? That sounds like an interesting and unique path to take the match that I don't think either of their matchups really allow. I mean, Q doesn't have any other matchups. What does he have? The father and the son from Star Wars? No. But Mixie vs Impossible Man is lame, Mixie vs Schumer wastes Schumer on a haha quirky guy matchup, and Lord English just does not sound nearly as interesting. Also Homestuck. It's an added bit of philosophy that, as someone who studied philosophy in school, adds a lot of interest to me. If Death Battle could actually come up with thought-provoking questions on their own, it'd add a layer of interest, but I'm also okay with them just using pre-existing questions that are commonly thrown around anyway. As long as they have that segment where they're putting each other into allegories and paradoxes as part of that's how they're fighting for most of the ending bit. There's a lot I'd love to see from Mixie vs Q. Could they do it? I don't know. I'm not sure they'd put in enough work to get it done like that before their budget pulls them back, but that doesn't make me love the matchup any less. Mixie and Q are great, and so's everything else here. For episode 9, my return to the season, I've actually got someone else here who wants to talk about it. This is my good friend, and he's going to talk about his most wanted matchup.
Technically, it would be more apt to call this matchup Devilman versus the Demon, but, Devilman versus Etrigan rolls off the tongue better. Now, if you know me, you know this is my favorite matchup of all time, with Etrigan being one of my favorite comic characters, and Devilman is just my favorite character, period. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Ecto. Now, let's talk connections. What do these two have in common? Both are a product of a powerful demon warrior being attached to a human host, and depending whether the human or the demon is in charge, they could be either a hero or a villain. It's also a battle of Western comics versus manga, and both characters were created, strangely enough, within, I think, 2 months of each other in 1972. How fair is it? It really depends what you buy for both, between Etrigan's inconsistent benefits from God Spear stuff and even more inconsistent Herald scaling, and Devilman scaling to a very ill-defined interpretation of biblical God. It's hard to say where both scale, but Uni Plus to low multi should be about right for both. Banter Potential is especially fun because Etrigan speaks entirely in rhymes, completely by his own volition. And Devilman's no stranger to shit-talking his foes either. He threw down with Hades and was shit-talking the guy the entire time. And the fight potential has to be one of my favorite parts of this fight, because of the sheer amount of bullshit these guys have in their arsenal. Ideas that come to mind for clashes are, Etrigan can send Devilman back in time with a punch using his Chronos spell, only for him to time travel back and punch Etrigan into another dimension, again, only for him to come back. Etrigan's sword could clash with Devilman's arm blades, both have an arsenal of elemental attacks, flames, energy blasts, and more to throw each other's way. And the amount of ideas I have for this matchup, honestly, are just more than I could reasonably fit into this segment without doubling the runtime of this video, so I'll try and wrap up. Essentially, these two characters in this matchup mean a whole lot to me. I could gush about this for hours, and I would if I had, the time. But it's a matchup I'd love to see spread around more, and I'd love to see more love for both characters in Versus as a whole. Also subscribe to Biffweed.
Episode 10. For as cool as high-flying, large-scale battles are, sometimes it's good to just have a grounded fistfight, and this is... grounded's maybe not the right word. Moomin Rider versus Kite Man. If this doesn't immediately make sense to you, that's fine. Moomin Rider is an incredibly wholesome hero with no powers who has a transportation-based gimmick and is seen as a joke by his contemporaries and enemies, but he maintains his status as one of the bravest and most determined heroes. Kite Man is an incredibly wholesome villain with no powers who has a transportation-based gimmick and is seen as a joke by his contemporaries and enemies, but maintains his status as one of the kindest and most dedicated villains. No, seriously, Kite Man might be one of my favourite Batman villains, unironically. He goes around making himself look stupider with a dumb catchphrase in honour of his dead son. He knows for a fact Riddler and Joker could kill him whenever they want, but he's still willing to help Batman double-cross them anyway. Kite Man is goated, and so is Moomin Rider. Obviously you can start out the fight like just sort of a generally fun vibe where it's a campy hero and a campy villain fighting. Probably have an on-the-run chase down the streets while they're at it. You could also have a genuinely good fight playing off Kite Man's genuinely cool moments and the battlesuit Moomin has in the webcomic. And then at the very end, when all's said and done, they've beaten each other to the point of barely being able to move, they're lying on the floor injured, the crowd's laughing because they look pretty fucked up down there, and people are assholes, and in that last moment, the crowd is silenced as the two stand back to their feet and have a brutal, realistic, tired brawl. The music becomes almost non-existent. We're left with little more than the sounds of rain as the two clearly tired and exhausted fighters continue their battle because they refuse to lose. Their punches become slow and weighty, they can barely stand. There's nothing left in them, but they keep finding something to keep them fighting anyway. Because for as weak as they are, it's what's inside that matters, and what's inside them can never be broken. Till one of them dies, of course, but that's just death battle for you. This has potential to have one of the most emotional and hard-hitting endings to a death battle. No music, nothing but ambience. The winner goes off after their victory. The crowd doesn't cheer them. The crowd is stunned at what they just saw. They step back in a silent respect as the winner walks off into the distance. Episode 11, who gives a fuck about these two anymore? It's Turok vs Jonah Hex. They're one-man armies from older time periods that go on time-traveling adventures after being exiled from their groups, where they use their period's weaponry to fight whatever comes their way. I don't know, it sounds neat. Jonah Hex is a really different kind of DC character, so it could be cool. I don't know, Turok's cool too. Sniper vs Captain Boomerang. It's an epic Australia dub over New Zealand. I see no problem here. So they're long-ranged and down under. They're in a mercenary group. One's loud and obnoxious, the other's quiet and reserved. Sure. I don't know, it sounds like it'd be fun enough. More Flash characters who aren't species might be fun to see. Boomerang, Cold if he has a good opponent, Grodd, you know. That's all I got. The main thing is, an Aussie takes a dub over a New Zealander. So this is one that runs solely on vibe. There are basically no connections here. It's Shirel from 2003 Ninja Turtles versus Deathstroke from Teen Titans. Yeah, they just vibe. Also, I like Shirel a lot and would be okay with him getting an episode. He's distinct enough from the other Shredders, I feel, though I can say that for all three of the 2003 Shredders, honestly. Fuck, these last few I don't have much to say about. This is Bleeds vs Purgatory. Now, I know I've voiced interest in Bleeds vs Red She-Hulk before, and I do probably still prefer that one, but I need matchups and this is another Chaos Comics one, so where's the complaint? In terms of themes, well, they're both angel people who were once just normal people who one day as a result of their romantic lives found their people slaughtered and motivated by vengeance and rage were transformed into the blood-powered red assholes that they are now. It's something like that. It's a bit shaggy because of how it has to be worded. Essentially, Bleeze was a royal who rejected her lovers, and thus they turned on her and she turned into what she is now in a blind rage, a Red Lantern, while losing her wings in the progress. Purgatory was a slave who became part of a royal's harem until the royal killed all the other girls and Purgatory became what she is now for vengeance, a blood goddess, while gaining her wings. Both use blood to fight, both have a red theme, both are angels but neither really look it because one has demon wings and the other one has bone wings. I think it's neat enough, it could definitely work as a fight. Purgatory uses swords, Bleeze is a lantern. I probably prefer the dynamic of Red She-Hulk versus Bleeze still, but Purgatory can fly, which does give her a big leg up on Red She-Hulk in terms of animation. Aside from that, this still falls into that unfortunate well of, as much as I like Bleeze, I do not want to hear Wiz talking about her backstory, because of all the things about Bleeze I like, her backstory is not really one of them. Well, there's no use pretending it's going to be anything else. The finale is Kyle Rayner versus Simone the Digger. Yeah, I know, its fans are obviously like, oh, well, duh, and its detractors are like, fuck you. What else is it going to be? Personally, I'm honestly a bit neutral in the matchup. I heard Simon can't summon the big full-size mech on his own, but I've also heard he can. Don't know who to believe. I've heard it's reasonable to argue that if you're going to give Kyle his non-standard White Lantern ring, you should also give him his wife equation? Wife equation. Bet Biff wishes he had that. Anyway, you could also give him his life equation, which I've also heard is not reasonable to do. I don't know who to believe. In general, I just don't really care for it much. Gurren Lagann seems cool, and I do want to watch it when I have time, and Kyle seems like a cool character, but I don't really see him on the same level as Hal, Larfleeze, Mogo, or Alan, but he's still cool. My one thing with this match is that a good friend of mine named Bang, who was in my prediction for the prediction blog on G1, and also my Batman vs Iron Man prediction, really wants to see this episode. I'd much rather it not happen until Season 10, just so he can be there to watch it, as he's currently away for a while and unable to watch Death Battle all this year and the first half of next year, so that's that. Yeah, well, that was this season list. What'll be my next idea for a theme season? Well, it won't be as limiting as the last 4, though I'll still set some parameters, of course, so it's not just 20 matchups that I think are neat, so we'll just have to see. I'll see you for that next time. Have a good one, fellas.